This is Cheryl with the Estes Valley Library. Welcome to a special edition of Our Wonderful World. When the library closed in March, I knew we wouldn't be able to have Our Wonderful World the way we usually do. And so I contacted Kathy Delker, an Estes local, to ask her if she would like to speak on Uzbekistan, a trip she took in 2014, and she graciously agreed. This is 4 episodes that will be posted on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, Kathy Delker.
Hi, my name is Kathy Delker, and it's my pleasure to share with you photos that I took during my trip to Uzbekistan in 2014. I added Uzbekistan to my bucket list of places to visit in 1990 when I ran across a book in a bookstore entitled The Fabled Cities of Central Asia. Those cities are Bukhara, Khiva, and Samarkand. I had a wonderful trip, which I booked through a travel company. The travel company had headquarters in New York, but was located in Turkey. The catalog for 2014 included this trip to Uzbekistan, and I thought, here's my opportunity. The rule was that if there were at least 2 people signed up, the tour would be a go. Luckily for me, 3 of us signed up. We had our own guide and a van driver. So my photos will show you, first of all, the magnificent, monumentally, colorfully tiled buildings. That's what I wanted to see. And through the course of my 12 days on ground, of course, I saw lots of aspects of daily life for the people who live in Uzbekistan. I want to make sure that you know why Uzbekistan is so important, even though you may be like me and never heard of Timur, a world conqueror who rivaled Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan. And finally, I have some shots of activities that you might be interested in seeing sort of step by step. So there will be 4 episodes to this presentation. You'll be able to look at them on Facebook and YouTube from the library. You can look at all of them or watch them sequentially on different days or choose only to watch one of them. So we're going to transport ourselves into the almost magical world of monumental buildings and warm, friendly people. I'm Kathy Delker, and it gives me great pleasure, thanks to the Library of Estes Valley, to share some of my photos from my 2014 trip to Uzbekistan, especially the fabled cities of the Silk Trade Route, Bukhara, Khiva, and Samarkand. My inspiration for taking this trip was a book entitled Fabled Cities of Central Asia, and it included many color photographs of the monumental, colorfully tiled, beautifully shaped madrasas, which are universities where men studied to become imams, the Islamic religious leaders, in addition to the madrasas, the mausoleums, and the mosques. But I feel the need to share a little bit with you about the history, specifically, as shown in this list of the episodes, information about Uzbekistan's national hero, the 14th century conqueror extraordinaire, Timur. This is a facial reconstruction and embellishment of Timur's skull, which does show that he was of Mongoloid ancestry. He lived from 1336 to 1405. His name is also spelled with an E, and he's also referred to as Tamerlane. This is because in his 20s, in some battle, he sustained arrow wounds that crippled his right arm and also his right leg. But that did not slow him down. He was a charismatic leader, evidently, and a military strategy genius, and a barbarian. He rivaled Alexander the Great in terms of the area, the expanse of the world that he conquered, and Genghis Khan in terms of the millions of people his armies massacred. They based some of the accounts on how many millions of people died on the hills of skulls that were there for hundreds of years. Tamerlane was, or actually let me call him Timur. Timur was born in a relatively small town, and his dad was a local chieftain. Timur knew how to play the system. He, in the first 35 years of his life, progressed from being a sheep rustler with guys that he recruited. He grew up learning how to ride horses, shoot arrows, and use swords, and the guys he recruited were all interested in the same thing. When his father died, he became the local chieftain, and he married well and ended up following his father-in-law, but when you boil it all down, he was an incredible leader, warrior. Here is a map of his, they call it here, military campaigns. And Samarkand, which is the city he nourished because he envisioned it being his capital, it is just to the right in the center, or just to the right of the big lake in the center. So on the west, he made it all the way and conquered Constantinople, Istanbul today. On the east, he went all the way to the western part of China. To the north, although it's shown only with that red dotted line, he almost got to Moscow. And the south, he devastated Delhi. That's why we have New Delhi now. He, like Genghis Khan, burned it to the ground. And then he also went to the Middle East. He conquered Damascus, and in Iran, Baghdad. They said he never lost a military campaign that he went on. So this was over a 35-year period from his mid-30s to when he died in 1404 or 5. He was on a campaign when he died. In preparing this presentation, I'd never given thought to how a military leader would provide for an army of tens of thousands of men. I saw the number 30,000. And he therefore was gone from Samarkand, his chosen capital, and Shahrizab's, where he was born and where in his 50s he decided to build his most magnificent palace. So let's go on and look at this, what little remains of his palace in Shahrizab's. It's the portal, the entryway into his palace. And on the left, and I know it's in the shadows, you can sort of make out tables that had souvenirs on them and maybe even see the human being standing next to the table. Again, gives you an idea of just how tall the portal was. As people from outside Uzbekistan came to Shahrizab's, these were people traveling the Silk Trade route, and that last 20 years of his life, envoys from even Europe, for instance, the Spanish envoy kept a very detailed journal and talked about how overwhelming this palace was. And even with just the portal, you can tell. They've not, at the time I was there in 2014, finished reconstruction. Here is one of those scale models that gives you an idea of what the portal looked like. And I'm going to go back for just a second because I forgot to have you look straight down the lower center, and you see a, you'll have to take my word for it, statue. This is a statue of Timur himself, and I didn't get to the front of the statue because they were doing so much construction in the area. It looked like too much to negotiate. This particular photo, again, my travel companion in the blue blouse, getting through the construction to go to the mausoleum and an adjacent mosque where Timur's father is buried. And the construction wasn't just going on in the historic area, the palace area. The whole city was torn up, and I can only speculate that the Uzbekistan government had turned its attention and funding to make Shahrizab's a more appealing tourist destination. This is a picture of those pylons, the entryway into Timur's fabulous palace, and you do see on the lower right part of the wall that was being constructed. There was construction on the city walls, the ancient city walls in the other big cities we visited, and I think even today they still may be using mud and straw to gain the width for these walls, which were so important in the Middle Ages because being on the Silk Trade route and in the middle of Asia, some army was coming through just about all the time. When Uzbekistan gained its independence from the former Soviet Union, the president of Uzbekistan immediately turned his attention to nurturing national pride. And one of the things that he did was to make Timur a national hero. And this is the wording that was on one of the displays in the Temur Museum in Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. The president, Islam Karimov, is quoted as saying, "If somebody wants to understand who the Uzbeks are, if somebody wants to comprehend all the power, might, justice, and unlimited abilities of the Uzbek people, their contribution to the global development, their belief in the future, he should recall the image of Amir Timur. Amir is the honorific that is translated as commander or general. What I've read is that Timur couldn't be a Khan because he was not a descendant of Genghis Khan. So he is referred to as Amir Timur. This is a plaque next to the statue, equestrian statue of him in the capital city of Tashkent. It says, and please notice that it's in probably the Uzbek language, although Uzbek is a melting pot, and so I'm not absolutely sure, but this is after the former Soviet Union left, and so I know it's not in Russian, it's not Cyrillic, but this plaque says Amir Timur Monument and Square. And by the way, this was a square that had statues of different Soviet Union heroes, the last, as I understood it, being Marx, when Uzbek became an independent country in 1991. They replaced the statue of Marx with this equestrian statue of Timur. So I'm going to start again. Amir Timur Monument and Square were created in 1993 based on the project and initiated by the first president of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov. So here it is, and this is the first thing I visited. I got to Uzbekistan, to Tashkent, the day before our tour began, and after I had my nap, because we arrived at like 6 a.m. in the morning, I asked the hotel concierge what I could go see, and one of the things he told me about was this park dedicated to Timur, which was only 2 blocks from the hotel. Everywhere we stayed in the major cities was only a block or 2 away from some major historic site. I think you'll agree this is really a magnificent equestrian statue. Here from the side and here from sort of head on with the relatively new tourist hotel behind it. So in addition to the statue of Timur in Shahrizabs and the statue in Tashkent, there's also a statue of Timur in Samarkand, and I think probably you'll agree with me that this portrays him as a rather benevolent older ruler. But make no mistake, he was a warrior at heart, and even during the last decades of his life, he was leading armies that burned villages and towns and killed people. Here is his mausoleum in Samarkand. It was attached to a madrasa built by his favorite grandson, and when that man died in battle in the early 1400s, Timur had the mausoleum built for him. Timur planned to be buried in his hometown, where his final luxurious palace was in Shahrizabs, but he was so ill on a military campaign that he died, and they brought him back to Samarkand. This is a side view, and then the actual mausoleum, which is an octagonal building with that phenomenally ribbed turquoise dome. This is a picture of the interior, in addition to tombs for his favorite grandson, 2 of his 4 sons, some infants and children that aren't identified. The green tomb, which is the one on the far right, it's dark green on the bottom and a lighter green slab of jade, not multiple pieces. It was the largest slab of jade in the world for centuries. This is where he is buried. You see the beautiful marble, I'm going to call it fence to keep tourists out of the area, and then the marble wall that transitions into the beautiful tiled ceiling or tiled walls, and finally the magnificent dome. Here is a scale model in a museum that shows you what the complex would have looked like when it was finally finished. Timur is so important that he has his own museum in Tashkent. This banner, probably as big as a billboard, is outside that museum, and the day I visited the museum, there were lots of field trip school kids because somebody representing a country in Africa had come to speak. And so you definitely can believe that the government is making sure that the future leaders of Uzbekistan are very familiar with Timur and his conquests. This is the museum devoted to Timur, although it also has other artifacts in it. Timur has a bigger legacy than Genghis Khan because he didn't just conquer vast territories. He gave Central Asia and the world Samarkand. Even though Samarkand was one of the 3 fabled cities of the Silk Trade Route, it was the fact that Timur chose it as his capital and began building the monumental mosques, lots and lots of beautifully tiled madrasas. His legacy is of that beautiful architecture, and you may be like me and never heard of Timur the Conqueror, who led huge armies all over Asia and into the Middle East. I've got some further reading for you and viewing. If you have any questions, please contact me at kathyinestispark@gmail.com.